This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. This is The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio. Joining me now, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who is a decorated combat veteran and author of 5 books. He holds a Ph.D., and he is, without any question, a defense and foreign policy expert. Macgregor was commissioned in the regular Army in 1976 after 1 year at VMI and 4 years at West Point. In 2004, Colonel Macgregor retired with the rank of colonel. In 2020, President Trump appointed Colonel Macgregor to serve as senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense, a post he held until President Trump left office. He has a master's degree in comparative politics and a Ph.D. in international relations from the University of Virginia. As I said in the last segment, I think Colonel Macgregor is that rare soldier who not only understands military strategy and geopolitics, but also American politics and the impact that the coverage of these events and political events have on the overall dynamic of any given military situation. And I have so many questions, I almost don't know where to start. He's an expert on matters regarding Europe, Israel, Russia, China, and Korea, and is known for his leadership in the Battle of 73 Easting, the U.S. Army's largest tank battle since World War II. And we are honored to have him. Colonel Macgregor, thank you for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, it's a privilege to be with you.
So I read a terrific piece, a concerning piece in the Washington Times regarding China's extensive military buildup, which General Charles Flynn, who is in the process of retiring as a commander of the Pacific Fleet, says is on a dangerous trajectory that threatens the peace and security of the region. General Flynn defended the recent deployment of U.S. long-range missiles to the Philippines, a move the Chinese have called a threat to their security. He also pointed out that the Chinese People's Liberation Army has rapidly transformed its forces over the last 10 years with new and advanced weapons and is conducting war games, drills, and exercises that demonstrate alarming new capabilities. So what do you make of what the Chinese are up to, Colonel Macgregor?
Well, China is not interested in a war with us. That's an absolute certainty. They're somewhat alarmed by the missiles in the Philippines, but not as much as they would be if we put missiles on Taiwan. If we were to put missiles into Taiwan that threaten China, that would be roughly analogous to the Cuban Missile Crisis, or for that matter, what we've done in Ukraine by building up military power in eastern Ukraine to attack Russia. So I think what we ought to be concerned at this stage about is the fact that much of that technology and capability can actually be harnessed to the Middle East and to the crisis that is building there, which I think is far more acute than anything happening in the Pacific.
So let's go to that region. We had both in the Ukraine-Russia situation and in the Middle East, particularly, we saw the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, I probably mispronouncing that, killed. Very dramatic. Tell us the implications of this, if you would.
I don't think there are too many implications other than to strengthen the resolve of the people opposed to Israel right now. We tend to pay a lot of attention to these programs of assassination. We forget when you eliminate one leader, you get another. And in some cases, you get somebody who's better, more intelligent, better equipped, and usually younger. So it doesn't necessarily improve your position. In this case of this man, the film footage of him is readily available, and he is clearly resisting to the bitter end. This doesn't look like someone who's really unhappy about being killed, if you will. In other words, this is not someone cowering in the corner. He's pretty defiant. I think the concern that I have right now is that Israel is on a dangerous path because it has created a universe of enemies. Very few people are paying attention, Roger, to what's been happening in the Middle East over the last 6 months. But the Iranian foreign minister, for instance, has been to all of the Arab nations. And I can tell you that whatever differences existed between Iran and the various Sunni Arab states, they're gone. They don't amount to anything. And at the same time, the Turks and the Iranians have grown much closer, despite the fact that they have serious disagreements about how they think northern Iraq and Syria should be sorted out in the future. Your viewers may not know this, but Syria and northern Iraq, actually most of Iraq, for a very long time were under Ottoman control. And before that, they were under Persian rule. These two states, Turkey and Iran, are now talking about cooperating against Israel and the United States. And they're being guaranteed privately a great deal of support and assistance from Russia. So you have a very dangerous situation setting up there. And when I mentioned the Chinese, I think what we should keep in mind about the Chinese is that they are very unhappy about the prospects of losing access to oil and natural gas in the Persian Gulf. And they've made it very clear to the Iranians that they will supply whatever material, military assistance or equipment or anything else that they need. And of course, the Iranians already have thousands of Russians in uniform and some civilian technicians on the ground putting together air and missile defense and strengthening Iran's capability to resist Israel. That includes pilots from Russia who may end up flying along with Iranians in their aircraft. This is something that I think, President Trump has said repeatedly, fine, we understand what you're doing, President Netanyahu, but you need to get this done. This needs to end. We need to find a way out. And I think President Trump is very right, because I think he has a sense that this thing is really racing out of anybody's control.
Do you see a scenario potentially where Israel could launch a cyber attack on Iran, following by plunging them into darkness, followed by direct attacks by missile against their military facilities and then their oil production and refining facilities?
Well, they have lots of targets to choose from. And thus far, despite pleas from the administration, and I say please because the administration has no control over Israel whatsoever, or for that matter, Mr. Netanyahu, not to attack the nuclear facilities or the oil terminals. But the Israelis have said from the very beginning that if they end up attacking Iran, that they will definitely destroy the oil facilities. That will be a drastic turn for the worst economically, not just for the globe, but certainly for the region, but more importantly, most of the world is siding right now with Iran, not us and not Israel. And I think that could trigger all sorts of bad things, because whatever the Israelis do to Iran, I think the Iranians are prepared to do the same, if not much worse, to Israel.
Do you agree with those who say that through their Chinese alliance, it's conceivable the Iranians already have a primitive nuclear device?
That's something that I can't answer. I think Bill Burns, who's the director of the CIA, says they do not. It's up to you and the rest of Americans to decide whether or not they care to believe that. I think the key point is that the Israelis, they keep mentioning their nuclear capability. They do it all the time. They've done it in the region for years. And I think right now Iran is at the threshold stage. In other words, if they wanted to build warheads for their missiles that are nuclear, they can do it. And I think they will wait to see what the Israelis do. If the Israelis actually try to use a nuclear weapon, I hope they don't, because I think that would turn Israel into a pariah state on a scale that no one has ever seen. People don't seem to understand that, we have a very pro-Israeli press. We have a pro-Israeli political system. That's not true in the rest of the world. It's very different, very much the opposite in most cases. And that's a dangerous situation. And so I think, we're on the precipice of a major regional war that has the potential to go global. And I don't think we're prepared for it.
What is the state of preparedness and readiness of our current U.S. military?
Well, for the last 30 years, Roger, I think we've been living on the capital that was accumulated during the Cold War. In other words, forces that today are frankly out of date, anachronistic. They're also demoralized as a result of all this nonsense with diversity, inclusion, and equity, as well as the treatment of people that refuse to take the COVID vaccine. I can't conceive of any military establishment in the world that has ever made so many mistakes in dealing with its own people. And on top of that, as I said, we're not really the right force organized for the right war. And again, perhaps President Trump understands this. I certainly applaud his deliberative attitude and his readiness to negotiate and talk, because that's been missing. And we need someone with a firm hand, someone who is a real leader to deal with Netanyahu, because right now Netanyahu is completely unchained. We don't know what he'll do, and we have no influence over him.
Very chilling. One of the an interview I gave yesterday, as you know, the Chinese have now established a sophisticated spying station in Cuba, 90 miles from our shore. This has got not a lot of coverage here in the United States, but there are other military experts who believe that given their alliances and capabilities, it is quite likely that they already have missiles there too. Now, while those missiles may be defensive in nature, they could be converted to offensive weapons. Do you think that we have a Cuban Missile Crisis going on right now that we don't really know about?
No, but I think that the potential for it is real. The Chinese are also very strongly established in Mexico, as are the Russians. People don't seem to understand the overlap between terrorism, organized crime, and state intelligence operations. They tend to blend together in, as you would say, in the fog of war. Right now, there's a lot to be concerned about in Mexico, not just Cuba, and for that matter, also in Venezuela. Again, one of the things that we have failed to understand is that we think in very blunt terms. You know, the Russians versus us, or the Russians versus, Ukraine. If you entangle yourself in a war with Russia, in particular, to a lesser extent China, but very much with Russia, they can horizontally escalate. In other words, Russia has a string on North Korea, not China. North Korea is very responsive to Russia. The Chinese and the Koreans hate each other. Xi would love to get rid of North Korea and just turn the whole peninsula over to South Korea that he can do business with. But it's Russia that has kept North Korea alive, and they can pull the string on North Korea. North Korea is well established also in places like Cuba and Mexico and elsewhere. And they have the capability of stirring up trouble in the Caribbean basin on a very large scale, and we've ignored that. The same is true in parts of Africa and certainly in Eastern Europe. Again, we've been taking steps over the last 3 years since this war in Ukraine started that have had a very, very detrimental effect on the rest of the world, and particularly on countries like China and Russia and Iran, who have begun to conclude that they're on the menu. And unless they pull together against us, they're going to die individually. And I think that's not something we wanted to achieve, but that's what this administration has done. It has fused more states and nations together. And of course, you've got the BRICS summit coming up. Turkey is going to join BRICS. Turkey has effectively walked out of the EU and walked out of NATO. The Turks have the largest military establishment in NATO outside of us and a larger army than we do. These are very powerful states now. We have to take them seriously. We can't treat them as though they're third world backwaters. They're not.
It is. Let us go, if we can, to the Russia-Ukrainian situation. The war propaganda in this country makes it extraordinarily difficult to know what is actually really going on. Sometimes you will read that the Ukrainians are on the cusp of a great victory, but in fact that's not the case. The Russians seem to be continue to grind. What would you say the status of this conflict is today?
Yeah, well, in a country where free speech is increasingly suppressed, it's hard to know the truth. And I understand that Americans are confused. Ukraine, what's left of it, is a pathetic organized crime state. We've poured billions and billions of dollars into that. Much of that has been siphoned off and is in bank accounts in places like Albania, Switzerland, Cyprus, elsewhere. There is no real state per se left. The population is down from almost 40 million to perhaps 15 million. Millions have left the country, and they will probably never go back. This is not something that Russia set out to do, but it's a consequence of our refusal to tolerate negotiations, to sit down and say, look, what do you want? Identify the interests on both sides, and we'll come to a solution. And now there's no room for negotiation anymore. We've lost our credibility with the Russians, just as we've lost our credibility all over the Middle East. No one trusts us anymore. And assuming President Trump wins, he's not going to be able to build trust overnight. It's going to take a lot of time. We're not going to recover from the reversals of this administration quickly. And we're not even talking about economics, Roger. That's another, swamp, if you will. But the national security environment is going to be tough, and foreign policy is going to be very tough.
You recently wrote online, I noticed, you have a very lively presence on X, formerly known as Twitter. I find it very informative. I urge people to follow Colonel Macgregor there. But you noted that the Pentagon was looking into creating online deepfake personalities to use on social media platforms. What were you talking about?
Well, this is another area that's of great concern. It should be to all of us in the United States. We have too much influence inside of the United States from federal agencies that historically, have not played a major role inside our country. And creating these deep fakes is something that's not unique to us. Others in the world can do it. And you risk a situation where no one can get to the truth any longer. No one knows what is true and what isn't. And I hope that people will start raising questions about this, because if we can't get the truth to the American people about a place like Ukraine, which is a disaster, and the truth is that the Russians did not launch an unprovoked attack. They launched an attack out of self-defense because they were watching a metastasizing regime and military establishment. It was only a matter of time until our missiles, in their view, showed up in eastern Ukraine. And they spent years telling us, please don't advance to the Russian borders. Do not expand NATO. And we foolishly expanded it. In fact, I would argue that NATO is so large now, it's so unwieldy, it's ineffective. And I think that's what we've discovered. We've now shown NATO to be toothless. We've seen that our equipment isn't effective. Our policies are disasters. The Russians have stunning victory militarily in Ukraine, but they don't want the war to continue, and we should help end it. And I think if we had a president like Trump, that he would be in a position not only to put an end to the war in Ukraine, but to leverage that success to find a way out of this terrible, dangerous situation in the Middle East. Of course, that's wishful thinking, I know, Roger, but I feel like I have to say it.
That is a true leader. If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Colonel Douglas Macgregor. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio, and we'll be right back.
I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. When an injured worker left me a message that said, "You probably won't call me back. I'm just a nobody," I called him right back. nobody's a nobody, and no one deserves a better firm than you.
He calls to tell me that he's been in an accident, and I'm just scared to death.
I couldn't have hoped for anybody better than Morgan & Morgan. It makes you feel like you're worth something.
It really did feel like family.
Injured? Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
The views and opinions expressed by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect the policies or positions of WABC Radio, its management, or its sponsors.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC Radio on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. I'm with Colonel Douglas Macgregor. We're talking foreign and defense policy, and he's been giving us a tour de force around the world. I do want to ask you, Colonel Macgregor, about this Department of Defense Intelligence and Intelligence-Related Activities directive that was announced just recently. It is Directive 5240.01. Now, there's a lot of bureaucratic discussion in here, but it appears to me that this authorizes our military to use lethal force domestically within the country. That means Americans, to a certain extent, firing on other Americans. Now, we know that there's an increasing number of our those joining the military service are illegals who are allowed to stay in the country and I guess get citizenship if they agree to serve, but that scares me even more. What do you make of this?
Well, the document itself is very poorly written. Certainly no one who's a professional soldier had much to do with this. This looks like something concocted by attorneys in the hope that the military can be subverted and become a permanent tool of the status quo. In other words, of the Biden administration and whatever comes after it that is equally mired in the swamp. You know, these people remind me of Bolsheviks. Lenin used to say repeatedly, you've got to get control of the police, the intelligence organizations, and the military. He called them the organs of power. And the more I listen to the people that are putting up Harris for election and are behind her and advising her and shaping her, they certainly reflect a lot of Leninist thinking. It's not something that the majority of serving American soldiers, at least based on my experience, would take lightly. Shooting your own people is probably the last thing anybody wants to do, and everyone will exercise restraint normally. This looks like an attempt to subvert, and I think that's what it is. And this is one of those things that should be cast into the garbage heap as soon as President Trump takes office.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's Kamala Harris who says in her interview, Donald Trump wants to turn our military or launch our military against those who disagree with him, those who oppose him, which of course he's never said and did not do as president last time, would not do it again, when in fact their own administration is doing exactly what she's talking about. But you, I think, hit on an absolute key point, which is information is crucial. We're in an information war. It's true. And you're involved with a great organization, Republic, which is seeking to step into that void. Tell us about it.
Well, I'm the CEO for Our Country, Our Choice, and we have fully embraced this new platform called Republic. It's a social media platform. It's a free speech platform, a grassroots approach to life. It's an opportunity for citizens who want to inform themselves. They can go on the platform, go on Republic, and read whatever is there. But if they want to take action, if they want to get some skin in the game, they have to join the platform. That means you pay normally $180 a year to join the platform, and it gives you enormous access because the information there is designed for you and where you live. So if you live in Wyoming or you live in Pennsylvania, in your community, in your county, you'll have information on all the sheriffs. Who are they? Where are they? Who are the representatives in the state as well as in Washington? And when you write something or you film something and you want to post it, you can tag them so that they are in receipt of what you've written or what you've shown them. This is an effort at accountability as well as information, and you cannot be canceled. You cannot be censored. The only things you cannot do on Republic is that you absolutely cannot advocate the overthrow of our government, and you cannot be pornographic. But otherwise, we hope that people will refrain from too much, let's say, ill-chosen words and language. But otherwise, you can go on there. There's nothing to prevent Nancy Pelosi from going on and building her own position on the Republic platform. Anybody can do it. And ultimately, this is ideal for small businesses. Any business that has less than 500 employees can go on there and advertise all they like. But we will not, under any circumstances, take any money from big corporate interests, big business. We just don't want to be hostage to those people because we know, Roger, they'll show up and they'll say, we like what you want to do, but we want you to change your message to emphasize this. That's not going to happen. There will be none of that.
All right, so
by the way, before I leave this, I want everybody to understand something. If you want to join Republic, and I urge you to do so, I think it'd be one of the best decisions you made. You can join for $120 right now.
Let me say, I joined not because I expect to make money. I'm not in it to make money. I think we need an alternate system for communications because of the mass-based censorship. So while I appreciate the plug, I'm not involved because for purposes of profit motive. I think what you built is very impressive. And look, folks, you should check it out. Make your own decision. Colonel Macgregor has great credibility with me. And I think it is a worthy project. But by all means, check it out. I want to thank Colonel Macgregor for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. And I want to thank him for his wisdom and his patriotism. Thank you, Doug, for joining us today.
Roger, thanks a million for all that you do.